They called me Dr. Vargas, a name that carried weight, a name my parents whispered with pride. I had the degree, the prestigious title, the perfectly starched white coat. But under that coat, my heart was failing. I held life and death in my hands every single day, yet I had never felt less alive. I was a healer who was profoundly, secretly sick. A success story who felt like a fraud. Every morning, I'd pull my hair back so tightly it hurt, hoping the physical pain would distract from the soul-crushing ache of living a beautiful, magnificent lie.
That feeling of being trapped inside a life you meticulously built, it's a silent epidemic. Welcome to Unbroken Women. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and today we have the profound honor of hearing from Dr. Elena Vargas of New York City. Her story is a powerful testament to the courage it takes not to build a life, but to dismantle one piece by agonizing piece in order to find the person you were always meant to be.
My world was a symphony of controlled beeps and hushed, urgent voices. Pre-dawn alarms, the scent of antiseptic clinging to my clothes, the weight of the pager on my hip. I was a cardiothoracic surgeon at one of New York's top hospitals. My days were a blur of 16-hour shifts, complex procedures, and the adrenaline of holding a human heart in my hands. It was impressive. My apartment overlooked the city lights, a sterile, minimalist space I was rarely in but paid a fortune for. My parents, who had scrubbed floors and driven taxis to put me through medical school, would tell their friends about my daughter, the doctor, with tears in their eyes. Their pride was the fuel I ran on. I was fulfilling the immigrant dream, their dream. I had a clear, defined path. I was respected. I was secure. And on paper, I should have been happy. But in the rare, quiet moments, the drive home in the dead of night, the steam from the shower fogging up the mirror, I'd see a stranger looking back. A woman with exhausted eyes and a life that felt like a beautifully tailored suit that was 2 sizes too small, slowly, methodically cutting off my circulation. The weight wasn't just the long hours or the life or death decisions. It was the crushing burden of gratitude. My parents had sacrificed everything. Their youth, their dreams, their comfort. They'd poured it all into me. How could I ever tell them their investment had yielded a product that was hollow inside? Every success felt like another brick in the wall I was building around my true self. Every compliment from a senior surgeon, every tearful thank you from a patient's family felt like a confirmation that I had to keep going, that this was the only version of me that mattered. I was Dr. Vargas, their daughter, the surgeon. Elena was someone I barely knew. She was buried under layers of expectation and obligation. I was performing a role, and the applause was deafening, but backstage, in the quiet of my own mind, there was only a terrifying, echoing silence. The first whisper was small, insignificant really. It came late one night, scrolling through my emails in the on-call room. An ad popped up for Doctors Without Borders. It showed a medic in a dusty, remote village. Her face tired, but alight with something I couldn't name. Purpose, maybe. For a fleeting second, I imagined it. Trading my state-of-the-art operating room for a makeshift tent. Trading my 6-figure salary for a sleeping bag. I felt a pang, a sharp, unfamiliar longing that was so intense, it almost hurt. I clicked it away instantly, annoyed at my own foolishness. It was impractical, a fantasy, but the seed was planted. It would whisper to me at odd times. I'd be suturing a patient after a successful bypass, a procedure I could do in my sleep, and a voice in my head would ask, "Is this it? Is this all?" It was a quiet rebellion, a tiny crack in the foundation of the perfect life I'd built. The day it all broke was a Tuesday, a routine valve replacement. The patient was a man in his 60s, a grandfather named Mr. Chen. He was nervous but stable. My team was a well-oiled machine. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. Mid-procedure, we needed a specific type of suture, a brand the hospital had recently switched to cut costs. The first one snapped, the second too. Precious seconds bled away as the nurse frantically searched for a reliable alternative. His pressure began to drop. The calm efficiency of the OR dissolved into controlled panic. We were fighting, throwing every bit of our skill and knowledge at the problem. But we were fighting a battle that had been lost before we even began. Lost in a boardroom, by a budget cut. We worked on him for another hour. A frantic, desperate ballet of compressions and monitors screaming their flat, monotonous tone. But he was gone. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it wasn't my scalpel that had slipped. It was the system. I had done everything right, and a man was dead. I stood there covered in his blood, staring at my own gloved hands, and I felt nothing but a profound, hollow sense of futility. My immense skill, my years of training, all of it. It felt like a pointless parlor trick in the face of systemic failure. The illusion of control, the God complex that every surgeon secretly harbors, shattered into a million pieces on that cold tile floor. The hospital called it an unfortunate outcome. There was an internal investigation, a review board, a lot of paperwork. I went through the motions, my voice steady as I recounted the events. I blamed the faulty equipment. I blamed the protocols. I blamed everything and everyone but the feeling that was truly eating me alive. The feeling that I was complicit. I tried to bury it. I told myself this was medicine. Patients die. It's the cost of doing business. I threw myself into work, taking on extra shifts, longer surgeries, anything to numb the gnawing emptiness. But the fear was always there, simmering beneath the surface. Fear of what this meant. If my work wasn't truly making a difference, then what was the point of the sacrifice, of my parents' sacrifice? The thought of questioning my path felt like a betrayal of the highest order. It was easier to pretend, to put the white coat back on and play the part. But every time I walked into an OR, I could see Mr. Chen's face. I could hear that flatline. The denial was a thin, fraying blanket, and the cold truth was beginning to seep through. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. For weeks, I'd lie in the dark, my mind replaying the surgery in a torturous loop. The guilt was a physical presence in the room, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. One night, around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and went into the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was a ghost. Her skin was sallow, her eyes were dark, haunted pits of exhaustion. And in that moment, something inside me just snapped. The carefully constructed dam of professionalism and control burst. A sob tore through me, raw and animalistic. I slid down the cold tile wall, clutching my stomach as years of repressed grief, frustration, and Hollowness poured out of me. I wasn't just crying for Mr. Chen. I was crying for the girl who wanted to help people, not manage budgets. I was crying for the woman who had sacrificed her entire soul on the altar of someone else's dream. The life I had built wasn't a life, it was a prison, and I knew with a terrifying clarity that if I spent one more day inside it, I wouldn't survive. After the tears stopped, there was a strange, unnerving calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of wreckage and a single clear path. I sat on my bathroom floor until the sun came up, the decision solidifying in my mind. It was terrifying. It felt like stepping off a cliff. To leave this job, this salary, this prestige, it was professional suicide. It was throwing my parents' sacrifice back in their faces. It was everything I was taught not to do. But the alternative, to stay, to continue suffocating, was no longer an option. The choice wasn't between success and failure anymore. It was between life and a slow, comfortable death. In the quiet of the dawn, I made a promise. Not to my parents, not to my hospital, but to the forgotten girl inside me. I was gonna get her back. I was gonna resign and apply to Doctors Without Borders. Typing my resignation letter was the most surreal experience of my life. My fingers, usually so steady and precise during surgery, trembled over the keyboard. Every sentence felt like a betrayal. It is with great regret. Regret? No, that wasn't right. It was with profound relief. Due to personal reasons. My entire life was a personal reason. The chief of surgery was shocked, of course. He offered me a sabbatical, a raise, a lighter schedule. He didn't understand that I wasn't running from the work. I was running towards myself. I politely declined. The moment I walked out of his office, having handed over my ID badge and pager, the silence was deafening. No more urgent calls, no more life or death alerts. The city noise seemed louder. The air felt different. I walked through Central Park, a ghost in my own life, feeling a terrifying cocktail of liberation and pure, unadulterated panic. I had no job, no plan, beyond a vague application, and a future that was a complete, terrifying blank. The blank slate was terrifying, but the pushback was brutal. Telling my parents was the hardest conversation of my life. I sat them down in their small, modest living room, the room where they'd framed every award I'd ever won. When I told them I had resigned, my mother's face crumpled. My father just stared, his expression hardening. "You're throwing it all away," he said, his voice thick with disbelief and hurt. "For what? To go play hero in the mud? We didn't sacrifice everything for you to throw your life away." My mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face, asking if I was sick, if I was depressed, if someone had done something to me. They couldn't comprehend that their dream for me had become my nightmare. It wasn't a choice to them. It was a failure, a public shaming. Then came the calls from colleagues. Some were concerned, others were condescending. "Are you sure you're thinking clearly, Elena? Don't make a rash decision you'll regret." The subtext was clear. They thought I was having a mental breakdown. I was an anomaly, a glitch in the system. You don't just walk away. Every conversation was another wave crashing against my resolve, trying to pull me back to the safety of the shore I'd just escaped. The nights were the worst. I was alone in my big, empty apartment, surrounded by the trappings of a life that was no longer mine. The external voices became my internal demons. My father's disappointed face would flash in my mind. The condescending questions from my old boss would echo in the silence. Was I crazy? Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? I'd look at my bank account, the comfortable number dwindling, and feel a surge of panic. The familiar pain of my old life, as terrible as it was at least a known pain. This new world was a terrifying void. The temptation to call my old boss, to beg for my job back, was immense. It felt like I was at war with myself, and every day was a struggle just to hold my ground, to trust that single moment of clarity on my bathroom floor. 6 months later, I was in a makeshift clinic on the border of a war-torn country. The reality was harsher than any fantasy. The heat was oppressive, the dust was in everything, and the suffering was biblical. We had a fraction of the supplies we needed. My skills as a highly specialized surgeon felt laughably inadequate. Here, I needed to be a GP, an obstetrician, a trauma medic, all at once. One afternoon, a mother brought in her little boy, no older than 5. He had a simple infection that in New York would have been cleared with a week of antibiotics. Here, without access to clean water and proper medicine, it had turned septic. I did everything I could, everything, but he died in my arms. I sat in my tent that night, covered in grime and despair, feeling like a complete and utter failure. I hadn't just thrown my career away, I had thrown it away to be useless. I was an imposter here, just as I had been back home. I reached for my satellite phone, my fingers hovering over the number for the travel agent. I was done. I was going home. As I sat there, defeated, a young woman who worked as a local translator, Aisha, quietly entered my tent. Her own family had been displaced by the conflict. She held out a small, cracked bowl with a piece of warm flatbread. She didn't say anything about the boy. She knew. She just sat with me in the silence. After a few minutes, she looked at me, her eyes holding a resilience I couldn't fathom, and said, "We are not gods, Doctora. We are just gardeners. We plant seeds. Some grow, some do not. We just keep planting." It was so simple, so profound. She, who had lost everything, was offering me comfort. She wasn't asking for a miracle worker. She was grateful for a gardener. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't about being a perfect, infallible surgeon. It was about showing up. It was about planting the seed. I put the phone down and ate the bread. The next day, I didn't try to be the hero. I just tried to be a gardener. I focused on what I could do, not what I couldn't. I learned how to set a broken bone with limited supplies. I learned how to diagnose malaria without a lab. I taught local women basic hygiene and wound care, planting seeds of knowledge. My focus shifted from grand, life-saving gestures to small, consistent acts of care. I started to connect with my patients not as complex medical cases, but as people. I held hands. I listened to stories. There was no prestige here, no accolades. There was just the work. And for the first time in my life, the work felt right. It felt real. It was exhausting, heartbreaking, and beautiful. Slowly, painstakingly, I wasn't just healing them, I was healing myself. A year later, I was leading a small mobile clinic. During a cholera outbreak, I found myself working for 48 hours straight, directing my small team, making impossible choices with a strange sense of calm. I was no longer the brittle, anxious woman from New York. I was resourceful. I was resilient. I was content. One evening, watching the sunset over the dusty plains, I looked down at my hands. They were calloused and stained, not the pristine hands of a surgeon, but they felt like my own. Finally, they felt like my own. I wasn't Dr. Vargas, the prestigious surgeon. I was just Elena, and it was more than enough. If I could speak to that woman in the mirror, the one with the haunted eyes and the tightly pulled back hair, I would tell her this. I know you're scared. I know you feel like you're drowning in gratitude and obligation, but your purpose isn't found in accolades, but in the courage to follow your own truth. The path is terrifying, and you will feel lost, but keep walking. Because the greatest healing you will ever perform, the most important life you will ever save, begins the moment you decide to heal yourself.
The courage to heal yourself. Thank you, Elena, for sharing your incredible journey with us. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let go. What part of Elena's story resonated with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of resilience, and click here to watch another incredible journey of transformation. You are not alone.